We're back on Boston has entered the chat, and we just got a +1.
Ta-da!
Adam Pellerin, you guys know him on pre and post, ringside with the Bruins. Catch him on the Hockey Hub too.
My man! Let's go. What's up, brother?
Not just waking up, not just bringing the energy, joining us in studio, Adam, you're the best. Marco Sturm, next head coach for the Boston Bruins, officially announced. Long awaited.
Yes, Lord.
Anticipated. Yeah. What do you think of Sturm as the next guy to lead the team?
Yeah, so it's an interesting hire.
Yeah.
Right? Because you're looking at a guy that doesn't have any NHL head coaching experience, and we sort of knew that might happen based on the end of season press conference with the ownership, right?
Yeah.
With Don Sweeney, Cam Neely, Charlie Jacobs, and hearing Don Sweeney say, you know, not necessarily NHL head coaching experience, but exposure, right?
Yeah.
And obviously Sturm has exposure to the NHL, being an assistant with the Kings, and obviously most recently in the AHL with the Ontario Reign. But it's an interesting hire because you're giving the guy an opportunity, and I thought that stood out in the press release, right? Because I read the press release very quickly before I came out here.
Right.
And I believe Don Sweeney's quote was along the lines of, this is somebody that deserves an opportunity. Sure. And so what do you have in Sturm? You have a young guy who's 46 years old, I believe.
Yes.
Who has coached 3 years in the AHL, has international coaching experience, obviously close to 1,000 games in the NHL. And you're looking for a good communicator, right?
Sure.
I think that, you know, this Bruins team could have some young players, and I think it's important to have somebody in place who's not that far removed from the game. A la Bruce Cassidy, if you remember, right, was the head coach of the Providence Bruins, came onto the Bruins as interim head coach, then hired full-time a few years back. And one of the things that people were talking about with him as one of his qualities was the fact that he could connect with some of the younger guys that were coming up, right? Because he coached them in the AHL, and he knew how to sort of communicate with those guys. So you're looking for a happy medium too, right? You want somebody who can connect with the young players, but you also have the existing stars in the room too, and David Pastrnak, Charlie McAvoy, and Jeremy Swayman, and so on.
That'll be the interesting part.
You know, every time I'm around you, I try to get perspective as someone who grew up here watching Bruins hockey and then transitioned as a professional to covering it.
Yeah.
What do you want to see? Like, kind of tugging on heartstrings here, but we're starting from the beginning. We're building this. What do you want to see the Bruins become? Like, as you sort of harken back to the glory days, but also recognize the new NHL as well, how do you want them to sort of put this together? What do you want the Bruins to look like?
Well, I think that the biggest thing with the Bruins over the last however many years, a long time, is the thing that stands out about the Bruins when compared to the rest of the league is the culture. Right, the culture is such a big part of who the Bruins are, and it has been for a very long time. And you start, obviously, it was Zdeno Chara and Patrice Bergeron. Brad Marchand carried that torch to keep the culture intact in the room. And I think that, you know, based on the number of changes that you had, the trade deadline, you bring in young guys, you bring in new guys at the start of the season, you know, there's a culture shift, right? And it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be a bad thing. It just means that it's different now.
It's changed.
And so I think that priority number one as head coach of the Bruins is establishing that culture in the room. And, you know, obviously there's a lot more that goes with that and building a hockey team, but I think that's where you start.
Okay.
Yeah, and as you pointed out, too, what Don Sweeney said, we want someone we were looking for a communicator, a leader, connects with players, develops young talent, and he ended it with, he is a well-rounded coach who's earned this opportunity. And with all of that, the AHL experience, international experience, 4 years on a bench with the LA Kings as well, has that NHL exposure for this team with how young they are, but also, to your point, the infusion. It's Pastrnak, McAvoy, Lindholms, Zacha, Swayman, Zadorov. I might be leaving some guys off on there. Get younger down the middle with the Casey Middlestat. That's what I think is so important with a Marco Sturm, is a guy that understands to develop, communicate. You point out what was so important for Bruce Cassidy to have success. That's what made a lot of sense. As Marco Sturm's name came up, and it's someone that used to play in Boston, of course, for 5 years as well, he understands what it's like to play in the city, but he understands, to your point, developing talent and connecting with those young guys.
It reminds me a little bit, if we're going to do a cross-sport comparison,
Let's do it.
And I know that people are kind of down on the Red Sox right now, to be honest, the way they're playing, but it's Alex Cora, right? Alex Cora is a guy that they brought in, somebody who played in Boston, who didn't have any managerial experience, was on the bench for Houston, and they gave him an opportunity, and all he did in the first year was win the World Series, right? I'm not saying that's going to happen. I'm not saying that
but it could.
But it could.
But it could.
You never know how things play out, right? Number 7 overall pick, moves in free agency, trades. But anyway, I digress. But it's not unprecedented that a coach without any experience at the highest level, whatever sport you're talking about, can have success early on.
Yeah.
And remember, this is not a rebuild. They're not stripping it down to the studs, right?
Yeah.
You have, as I mentioned, guys in place who are pretty damn good, right?
Right.
David Pastrnak and Swayman, and you mentioned some of the other names as well. You McAvoy, you have Zadorov, again, year one, right? In year one, for players in any sport, in any city, there's an adjustment period sometimes, right? And I think we saw that with Nikita Zadorov. And I think as the year went on, we started to see him play a lot better. And obviously there were a lot of changes as well. And Elias Lindholm dealing with that back injury at the start of the year, right? That obviously hampered him. And we saw, how well he played towards the end of the year, skating with David Pastrnak. And we saw how well he played in the World Championships as well. All the Bruins, really, that were playing.
Yeah, they did.
The World Championships had a good summer. So, you got the fresh start with a new head coach.
Yeah.
You have a good summer at the international level, maybe a springboard for success going into training camp.
Okay, but that's short term, and I'm walking with you on that, but let's keep walking.
Yeah, sure.
Before you came on, you heard me and George. I
didn't hear you, actually. I was
you didn't?
up.
Okay.
I was reading the press release.
I don't blame you.
So it surprised me.
He's
What did you
student of the
say?
game.
I had pitched the idea of us having the discussion of the timeline for when this team gets back to the playoffs competing for Stanley Cups, okay?
Sure.
And so the point I made was I'm looking at the oldest teams in the NHL, a list, right? And I just looked Eastern Conference. Most of the teams at the top are old as hell. Lightning, Panthers, Canes, Capitals. These are teams that are at the top right now that the Bruins have been competing against anyways. But they're getting older. Bruins are now younger, new coach, looking to get back there. I think timeline-wise, are we talking 2-3 years here, you think? Is this, and I know we talked about, well, it could happen in year one. It probably won't.
Right.
So are we talking 2 to 3 years here where we think this Bruins team could be back competing at that upper echelon? Because if so, these teams I just told you are getting older. So if you're talking championship windows here, it's ripe for the picking for the Bruins.
Yeah, and again, those other teams could address that too. Right?
They could.
So you never know.
They could.
But in terms of just looking at the Bruins, I would just look at history. And what does history tell you in terms of what is the Bruins' organizational philosophy? Is that we want to compete for Stanley Cups.
Sure.
Right? And so they made and again, people say, well, you made the playoffs 8 years in a row. What does that mean if you don't win a cup? Well, I mean, it does mean something.
Of course it does.
Because it does show you that there is a commitment to being in the dance.
And you're close.
And if you're in the dance, you have a chance.
That's right. You're close.
So I think that, based on that and based on, the fact that they got guys in place and they'll make moves in the offseason. They have the number 7 overall pick. I mean, that's nothing to sneeze at.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
So I think, within a couple of years, it can absolutely be a contender.
Okay.
No question about it. Especially, look who you've inked up. You've inked up, I know Jeremy Swayman had a bad year.
Yeah.
Right? He's your goaltender for the future.
Yes.
David Pastrnak, Charlie McAvoy, guys who are veterans, who are on long-term deals that can help
playoff experience.
With playoff experience, they can build that foundation. So that's a good jumping off point, right? You're not starting from square one here.
Yep.
Right.
It's not an entirely young roster. It's not entirely
Well, that's
young
why they don't use the
lineup.
word rebuild. They say retool. Right?
Yeah.
It makes sense.
Whatever you want to start it, rebuild, retool, revamp, renovate, is what the Bruins are doing. They're hitting a restart. They picked a direction at the trade deadline.
That's right.
They didn't get entirely younger, but they got quicker. And to your point, they have the Pellerin.
And it's a big offseason for Don Sweeney.
Heck yeah.
It's a huge offseason.
Yeah.
Seventh overall pick.
Yeah.
Cap space.
Absolutely.
A lot of draft capital.
New head coach.
New head coach.
Right? It started there. All right. Now it's, a new head coach. Got the draft coming up. Got free agency coming. I mean, there is a lot.
It's happening fast, too. Bees are back, baby! Woo! Toby! Champagne! Come on!
We're still waiting on the bottle service. Adam, thanks for hopping on. Break glass in case of emergency. You're the man.
Hey, good to see you guys.
Always good to see you. Make sure to catch Adam
my
on
man.
Hockey Hub as well. We'll have full breakdown on Marco Sturm there.